In this video, I'm going to explain how layers work in Luminar Neo, and I'm going to do it using a texture pack so we can create a more painterly look to our photos. You can take these techniques I'll share with you here and use that with any of your photos, your own texture library, but the textures I'll be featuring in this video are actually part of a mega bundle, a photographer's toolkit that 𝗗𝗲𝗏 have put together, featuring digital assets from myself and other really well-known Luminar Neo instructors such as 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗧, 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗽𝗀, Darlene, Digital Photo Mentor, René Ladrado. These guys have supplied courses, masterclasses, presets, skies, texture bundles, all sorts of digital assets that are available to you at a fraction of what they normally cost. It's the power of bulk buying from 𝗗𝗲𝗏. They've taken all of these amazing digital assets, combined them into one toolkit for you guys, and you can save 90% off the price through the link in the description below. It really is well worth checking out. But for my part, I want to show you how we can use those textures, and let's understand how layers work along the way. So in the catalog here, we've got a couple of examples I've worked on. This one, sheep in a field, I just did that one before, and I showed this and this image here to my wife just before, and I said, which one should I feature in the video showing textures? And she selected this one here. She thought this more abstract shot was pretty cool. So this is the type of effect that we're going to create. As you can see over on the left hand side, we have the original photo, which is highlighted at the moment, and then above that we have a series of other layers as well. So we're going to create something similar, and this is a point to bear in mind as I create a virtual copy to work on. While my approach to this edit is going to be the same, the end result is probably going to be completely different, and the reason for that is this is a very creative process, and you just get very fluid with which textures you're introducing and how those layers interact. You'll see what I mean as we get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is right click, come to the adjustments, and we're just going to revert this photo to the original. And now side by side you can see where we came from and the effect we ended up with. So let's start at the beginning here. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually duplicate this layer, and that means that I keep my original photo untouched underneath, and then any crazy stuff that I put on top, I can always go back to my original. That's one of the great things with working with layers. So for creating a sort of more painterly effect, what I want to do is actually destroy the photographic detail. So I'm going to start by bringing that structure down. How about we just pop in a bit of accent AI just to see what that's doing for us, just to bring in a bit more color. Sure, let's go for that. Now, of course, we can reduce structure to sort of destroy the details within a photo, but another really great way for doing that is to come into the details section. And as you know, we can really add detail to our photo by pushing these into positive territory, but we can also go the opposite way and destroy detail. So I'm going to bring the small details down and just see how that looks, bring the large details down as well. And we're starting to already create a more sort of painterly look to this. So this is our before and this is our after. We don't need to go full bore with this effect, but what I prefer to do, rather than just sort of dialing these back and just sort of putting them at a more minimal amount, I like to go full intensity with those, come to the masking section, and then actually erase the effect by about half. So I'll put the strength around half. I'm going to get rid of the softness from my brush, put the size at the maximum, which is 400, and then I'm just going to sneak my way down over the photo. And when I release, we now have that effect with 50% opacity. So here's our before, here's our after, or more precisely 48% opacity, because that is what I painted it in with. Okay, let's look at another effect that we could do to sort of give this a more painterly feel. So what I'm going to do is jump into the blur section, and you can see that the reflection from the lights here is picking up in all the water. I was getting absolutely drenched. I was borrowing a Canon R5 Mark II and putting it through its paces, so I probably shouldn't have been out in the torrential downpour that this was, but well, you got to test the gear, haven't you? So anyway, let's move on and hope Canon aren't listening. One thing we can do is push the blur up. So obviously that is definitely going to destroy details for us, right? But Gaussian blur is not our only option. What we could do is actually use a motion blur and try and mimic the line of the reflection. So if we push the amount all the way up to 100, you can see that those blur lines are moving horizontally. Well, what if we move them up and down to match the direction of that reflection? Something like that. So here's our before and our after. And then what we could do is just leave that effect more heavy top and bottom and bring back some of that detail through the center of the frame. So let's do that with a brush in the erase mode, and I'm just going to sort of chip away at this through the middle. I want to make sure that I've got my softness back, and I'm just going to pull that effect away through the center of the frame, drop the strength a little bit more, go for another pass through the middle, and then just sort of feather that off through there. And then if we want to bring it back at all, we can just go a bit heavier again, maybe through the bottom of the frame. Let's see, before and after. And one last thing before we start adding those painterly textures, I really want to make those lights glow. So the green lights were on, so I really want to intensify that, but I want to bring up the red of the stop lights as well. So let me show you a technique we can use. I'm going to use a tool that I think is very underrated, and that is neon and glow. So we have this squiggly line selected here that allows us to paint onto our photo. So I'm just going to click in the light right there. And as you can see, we've got this lovely purple glow. We'll just work on one light at the moment, so it's nice and easy to see exactly what's going on. I like to push the amount to 100. I can always bring that down afterwards, but having that setting at 100 means that anything else I do to these sliders is going to be really easy for me to see. If I have the amount like down at about 12 or something, and then I'm messing around with the other sliders, you can't really get a feel for exactly what's going on. So push that amount all the way up, and now we can see, okay, if we push some atmosphere in, it's like it's lighting up fog through the sky. Okay, let's go with that. The hue slider. Okay, well, we could make this light go blue. So if you wanted to, you could actually kind of harmonize the green over here with a green look over here, even though it was a red light. However, I am going to go with a red light. So we'll push that hue slider into the red territory, maybe more of like an orangey red, something like that. And then we can take away the white from the center of that light if we want. And then once we've got the look we want, we can just sort of play with this amount slider and go, okay, well, how much of that glow do I want? Let's go pretty heavy-handed. And just to sort of show you that effect again over here on the green light, let's come in. We need to open up a new instance because we're doing a completely different color. So had I painted this and started playing around with it with the same neon and glow tool active before, what I'm doing here would match the same settings as what I've done over here, and we'd end up with a red light. But we want a green one. So let's push that spread up. Let's go high with the atmosphere again. And now let's hunt for a kind of green look that we like. I don't know, something like that's okay. And again, let's come up to the amount slider and just ease that back. Because it's already green in that area, we don't need to go too heavy-handed with that. And maybe I'll make it a bit more bluey green. Yeah, before and after. Okay, cool. And let's have a quick look where we've come from and where we've got to. So on the left is our original, and on the right is our sort of more painterly look that we've created already. Before and after, before and after. Now this is the first benefit of working with layers. If you feel like you've gone over the top with that effect, and personally, yes, I do. I think I've gone too heavy-handed, but that's okay because what we can do is come into the layer properties here and we have this opacity slider. So this opacity slider speaks to the layer that we have selected only. So on the bottom of the stack here on the left-hand side, we have our original photo, and then on top, we have the version that has all of these effects applied to it. So we had the structure AI, enhance AI, a bit more negative structure, negative details, bit of blur, neon and glow, and then another instance of neon and glow on top of that for the green light. So now we have that layer with all of those effects. We're able to control the layer properties and the opacity, i.e. how much of this layer we see. So with 100% opacity, we see all of that layer and nothing underneath. If I bring that down to about 50%, we're seeing half and half. So for example, if I right click and hide that layer, now we see the underlaying photo. And now if I right click and show the layer, we see the layer that we were working on at 50%, or as we push that opacity up at 100%. So I'm going to put this somewhere around, I don't know, 80%. We'll go with that. So now we've pushed our photo into a more sort of painterly look to start with, but there's still a lot more we need to do. And I like to do that with painterly textures. And it's all about how we get those textures to interact with the layers underneath. So that's what we're going to do now. So to load in a texture, we just treat it like another layer. And we click the plus icon here to add a new layer. And then we can click the plus to navigate to any texture that we want to add in. So these ones are all grungy kind of textures. I've got industrial textures as well, but the ones that we want to look at are these painterly textures here. These are really good options to use with lovely artistic brush strokes, and also these artisan textures as well that are all included in the texture bundle as part of the toolkit that I'm going to put a link to below. So just pick any one. It really doesn't matter, right? So we're just going to go with this bluey texture here, and this is going to be a really good example as well. So if we push the opacity to 100%, you can see it's got this kind of ink blotchy texture, and it's a blue texture. Now, the great thing with working with a colorful texture is we can actually change this color to any color we want. So the first thing we want to do is actually get this to interact with the layer underneath. And just changing the opacity, i.e. how much of this layer we see versus how much of the layer underneath we see, that's not really enough for us. So what I like to do is put the opacity to 100 and then come and have a play with the blend modes. So we can go through these and see how changing these blend modes makes that texture affect the photo underneath. And some that I really like are overlay, soft light, and hard light. They're really good options and help to intensify the contrast in the photo. These two here, lighten and screen, work by brightening up the photo. And the ones above that, color burn, multiply, and darken, are always to make that texture interact with the photo underneath, but do it in a way that makes everything darker. So the ones I use most commonly are overlay, soft light, and hard light. So let's go for hard light in this instance. And then what I'd like to do is come to the color section. And if we come all the way to the bottom, we have this hue shift here. And if you don't see that, it just means that you need to expand the HSL section by clicking on it, come all the way down, and the hue shift actually changes the color of that texture and therefore the way that it's going to interact with the photo underneath. So we could push it towards a really deep blue if we wanted to. We could make those reds pop a bit more. It's entirely up to us. And another option we've got is to actually desaturate the texture, and that way we have the original color from underneath and then just the texture from this photo that's been introduced. And if you don't believe me about these changes here, what we can do is go back to the layer properties, and rather than having hard light, change it to normal, and you'll see that we have indeed desaturated that layer. So if I hide that color effect, you can see it was blue. Now we've made it just pure gray. So there's no color information to interact with the layer underneath. All we're going to see when we change this to any different blend mode is the texture only. So let's go back to hard light. We're going to drop the opacity amount down, because what I like to do is get the look I'm after, and once I'm happy with it, bring the effect down by just dropping that opacity. And now all I do is just work my way through these textures, just randomly clicking on them, loading them in, just having a little hover over these different blend modes, see whether I like the effect it's creating. If I do, I might use it. If I don't, all I'll do is come over to the layer, right click on it, and just remove the layer. Easy as that, and then we can just go again and pick a different one. Okay, let's try this one. This has got some crazy texture, and if I remember rightly, this is actually a photograph of an artist's studio floor in Barcelona. So these textures really have been collected and curated from around the world. Right, I really love this texture. So let's see how we can actually incorporate this into this photo. So we can come down again and just flick through these different blend modes and see what we like the look of. And for this one, I quite like the idea of actually brightening this up a little bit. So I am going to go for screen for this one. But as I really like this texture, what I'm going to do is utilize it again, but this time change the blend mode to something a bit more contrasty, because we have lost a bit of contrast there. So the easiest way to use this texture again is to right click on that layer and then just choose duplicate layer. So now we've got a doubling up of the layer with the same opacity that we had before and still in the screen mode. So now let's just come down and have a little play and see if there's a different mode that we prefer. Like hard light really is giving that a good kick in the pants. Let's go for that. Now I know I'm being really brash with how heavily I'm applying these textures, but that is for a reason. I want to show you how we can utilize layers to actually minimize this effect that we're creating. So we're able to work really heavy-handed and just get a look that we're after. And then if we feel like we've gone too far, There's a good fix using layers. All right, so we're going to add another new layer. Let's make this our last one. This time we're going to come into the 𝗵𝗫𝗍 section, and this one looks quite an interesting one. So we're just going to go with this texture here. To load it in, I need to click on it again. That's going to put it over the top right here. Now I'll push the opacity to 100 so you can clearly see what we're adding. As you can see, a really nicely layered artistic texture. So let's see what we can do to get this to interact with the photo underneath. And what you go for here, this is entirely up to you, whatever your personal preference is. Soft light is a really nice blending mode. If you come down to things like difference and subtract, you can get some really funky effects as well. And there's no reason why you can't do that if that's your creative preference. So I'm going to go for soft light for this one, bring the amount down, and I might just have a little play with the color. Grab that hue shift again and just see if there's an effect that I prefer. I don't know. Again, it's hard to see this color change because I've already dropped the opacity right down. It's much easier to see those color effects with the opacity set high, and then you can bring it down afterwards. So I'll come back into the tool, grab that hue shift, and you can see how by moving that around, it's affecting the overall look of that layer. So let's go for that. I'm happy with that. Okay, we're going to close that down. And now comes this bit where I was saying, okay, we admit that we've gone far too far with this and we're actually struggling to see the underlying photo now. Well, no problem. We're going to select one of these versions of the photo from the bottom of the stack, and we're going to duplicate it and bring it to the top of the stack. So I'm going to come to duplicate layer on the layer that I edited previously. And now watch this. If I bring this up to the top of the stack and release, there you go. We see that original photo layer that we had edited with some of the tools inside Luminar Neo. And we also saw it with a little bit of the texture showing through because that opacity had been set to, I think, 78 on this layer. So it duplicates the layer and the settings that were applied to it. And so now we can actually utilize this layer and drop the opacity down. Oh, I've selected the wrong layer, so that is a rookie mistake. You can see this little orange border. That's telling me that is the layer that is currently selected. I want to be talking to this layer at the very top. So we want to make sure that that is the thing that is selected. And now when I drop the opacity down, now we start to see that very textural effect that we had created through these layers here. But we can minimize that effect by bringing up the opacity of the photo layer that we edited. So how much of that texture effect we show through versus how much of the photo we see, that is entirely up to us. I don't know, let's just go for a 50-50 split, nice and easy. So now if I press the \/ key, we see our original photo, and now we see a more painterly texturized effect. But wait, there's more. One of the things that used to annoy me a lot with Luminar Neo was that when I wanted to color grade or add contrast to my photo at the end, when I'd been working with layers, I couldn't, because any effects that we apply to layers only speak to that layer. And currently the effect that we see on the screen is a combination of multiple layers. And so if we want to change the overall look, we'd have to go in and change the contrast, for example, in every single layer. But not anymore. Thankfully, we can merge all of those layers down. Once we've done that, any tools that we apply get applied specifically to the photo globally, which is a great thing. Let me show you. So what we want to do to merge these layers is actually select them all. So I'll click on the top one, hold Shift on my keyboard, and then click the bottom one. Now all of these layers are selected. That allows me to right click and choose Merge Layers. And to be honest, it's not the quickest thing because it's calculating all of those tools that we applied, the different blend modes, the different opacities to create the final output. And the final output is actually a 16-bit PNG file. That is our new layer. So it's a lovely rich data file for us to work on, and that is what we're then able to color grade, add a contrast look to, and we're done. So now you can see that we have that on the top of the stack, a merged version of what is underneath. So if you want to, you could go through and delete the layers underneath so that you have a smaller digital footprint in your catalog. Or alternatively, you can leave them there and you can continue to play around with these layers by dragging them up on the top. It's entirely up to you. There's a lot of flexibility here. But the thing that I was wanting to do was just sort of finish this off with a bit more contrast, So let's jump into the develop section and we can just apply a bit of smart contrast, see what that looks like. Yep, not too bad. I prefer adding contrast through curves, and a good old trusty S-curve normally does a lovely job of adding contrast there. And we can even use our curve to color grade. So for example, if we wanted to add a color into these darker areas around here, we can grab that bottom slider of, say, the blue channel, and as we bring that up, it's going to inject blue into those darker pixels. We can add a bit of green in there as well if we wanted. And if we grab the reds in the highlight area, we can just add more red into those highlights. So using the curves is actually a really nice way to color grade your photo if you want to. One common finishing touch is to add a vignette to help draw our viewer's eye to the center of the frame. But if you're working on a texturized or more painterly look like we are here, don't do it with a traditional vignette. I've got a much better way to do it, and that is by using a texturized vignette. The texturized vignette that I'll show you here is included within that texture component of the mega bundle, link in the description below. But let me show you how to use it. So we're going to come up to the plus icon one more time, plus again, and within the texture set, you can see this folder here is vignettes, and we can either go for a vignette that we're going to use in multiply mode, and that's going to get rid of the gray pixels, leaving a contrasty black outer rim, or alternatively, we can just darken it down by using multiply mode. And as you can see, we've got different texturized border effects, and that's just going to help to intensify that painterly look while still adding the vignette. So I'm just going to click on it, and if I push the opacity to 100, you'll see exactly what we're talking about here. And as I zoom in, hopefully on YouTube, you're able to see the level of detail, and I've just moved it. If that happens, if you get a misalignment because you drag your layer by mistake, just press Ctrl-Z on the keyboard and that will pop it back into position. So in order for us to see the photo through that vignette and still have that darkening, well, the clue is on the name of the folder. We just want to change that to multiply mode. So there you go. Let's hide this layer and then show it again, and you can see how all the edges are darkened, but it's done by introducing yet more texture to our photo. I don't want to have it that heavy-handed. I'm going to bring the opacity down, and if you don't want it to encroach quite so far into the middle, then all you need to do is just expand the size of that vignette. Really nice and easy. And we can also colorize those darker pixels as well. They don't have to be pure black. So if I do leave them a little bit tighter so we can see what's going on, we are again going to go in and use curves, because it's literally that same effect of grabbing the bottom handle on one of the colors and lifting it up. So now you can see that we're actually adding blue only to those black pixels. And again, if you don't believe me, let's come to the layer properties, not have it in multiply, look at normal, push the opacity up. You can see that we've now got blue pixels around the edge, and that's why it's adding blue into the photo when we change that to multiply. And now there is a color there. What you can do is again grab the hue shift and change that color to whatever you want. So if you wanted to add more red around the edge, you can absolutely do that. Here's our before and our after. What a huge difference before and after. And if we compare that to what I created before, as I said, it was going to look very different, and you can clearly see that the effects between this first version that I created and the one that we just worked on then, they are very different, very unique, and that's one of the things that I really love about this type of photo editing. It's just so experimental, it's just playtime. So while I hope you like this rather abstract edit I've done here, most important thing for me is that you guys actually start to understand the intricacies of layers, how they work, how those blend modes interact, and the possibilities that playing with layers can actually open up to you. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye-bye for now.